the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Each week our podcast begins with the sound of a skylark. That actually normally is a pre-recorded skylark because we're often doing different subjects, but this week we're just a few yards away from a skylark as we speak.
Yes, Matthew, we're on one of the high spots of Hyash Farm and I reckon there's the best part of 20 pairs of skylarks on the 100 acres around us. It's a really high spot. We're over 70 metres above sea level here, and we've got a panoramic view of Norwich to the north of us. Skylark just coming up out of the crop again and singing quite close to us. Absolutely delightful. And that one's up over 100 feet. Tiny dot in the sky and still singing. And this field is really quite prominent on the farm for more than one reason. It's got quite a lot of history. Where we're standing, it was presumably an arable field in the 1930s and early 1940s when my father came to Hyash Farm. Then we had the Second World War. And where we're standing, going diagonally across the field, was a roadway put in. And it was to help defend Norwich from the south, where the German bombers were coming. And we're dead in line with two really important businesses in Norwich at that time. One was Lawrence Scott and Electromotors, and the other was Bolton and Paul. And they were both targets for the German bombers.
Both engineering firms.
Yes.
Bolton and Paul made aircraft for the RAF, didn't they?
Correct, and that's why I'm going to pick this.
Rat's not interested in history. Go back in the car, Rat.
Right, there he is. He's back in. Unfortunately, I left the window open, so we might have a tirade of barking. And so what happened, a road went across this field simply because you could see to the south where the German bombers were perhaps coming in from. So it's a panoramic view, both for the artillery that was situated right across this field, and the name of the field, which I don't know back in history, it has a new name from the 1940s. It's called the Gunfield. And so every 100 yards or so would be a monumental searchlight going up to try and encircle the German bombers when the raids came, the Baedeker raids, and then there would be artillery guns all situated across this field. And one night we had quite a serious air raid here, and you can see there's a sort of dark line out in the middle of the field, and one of the searchlights picked up the bomb coming down straight towards where the troops were, the gunners were on the field, and the bomb went off, but nobody got hurt. The second bomb landed about 200 metres away, very close to some farm cottages, killed a number of the working horses on Hyash Farm, split the cottages right down the middle, and the third bomb was called a UXB, an unexploded bomb. Fortunately, it didn't go off. It landed in the corner of Fox's Grove and was dug out a few years later by hand. What a job. But we're standing on this high spot, and the road was removed by the RAF after the war. All the flints were taken away, which formed the access, and the guns, the artillery, was actually stored just about a mile away at Arming Hall. There was some large factories there, and I used to cycle to school on sunny days in the summer. The doors were open, and I could actually see the artillery, the guns that were used to try and bring the aircraft down to protect Norwich.
You were born into a world still thoroughly worn out, exhausted,
yes,
grey and drab after years of war.
Yes, exactly that. So, and subsequently, The government brought out several statutes, and one of which I responded to as an early farmer in 1971, food from our own resources. And this field was originally grazing. There were sheep here when my father arrived, and it started to grow wheat, and it's incredibly good wheat land. It's heavy clay, and with lots of chalk in it. It was good for sugar beet as well, and potatoes. And now it's a wildflower field, and I cannot believe that I'm going to show you something really special, because over the last 4 or 5 podcasts we've been looking at orchids on the farm. One of our earliest ones growing in the woodlands, the early purple orchid. Then the next podcast we visited the bee orchids on the other side of the farm. Last week we did the common spotted orchid, and the sun has just come out. Wow.
It's lovely.
Look at this. And 20 yards away, skylark coming into the nest and down.
You don't often see them that close.
No, absolutely perfect.
It's just a cricket pitch length away from us, very near.
Yes. So, right, let's just walk this way a little bit, because we are right by one of the footpaths on High Ash Farm that runs right through the centre, and there's a sign here which I put in to help everybody. It says plant of interest, pyramidal orchid. So perfect, and there's a little picture of it and what to look for. And I bought a couple here just as the first ones were coming out. I'd only found 1 or 2, and the lady who came from Banstead in Surrey visited the farm, a special treat for her, and she'd got rather thick glasses on, the old National Health type glasses, and I thought I'm going to have a struggle to show her the orchids. They were only just beginning to come out, and so we walked up here, and she kept pointing at things, and she found over 20 orchids. She was, I think I'm going to keep her with me for the rest of the year. Absolutely incredible. Her eyesight was superb, and she was picking them out and getting very excited. So I've got a little secret track here, another one just there. And so what we're going to do is walk in, because I've found 1 or 2 really beautiful specimens.
I'll follow in your footsteps here, so we flatten as fewer flowers as possible, because I mean this field is absolutely covered in oxeye daisies as well, which is a beautiful sight.
We're nearly there.
Oh, it's fantastic, with the sun on it as well. Oh my word, look at that. That's a beauty, isn't it?
Yes. So this is your pyramidal orchid. Some people say pyramidal, but of course you don't say the
Pyramid.
pyramids in Egypt, do you? It's a pyramidal orchid, and it is just coming into flower. It's a little bit taller than the other ones that we've seen, but they'll all be up about this height now. They've had some rain. The sun's just come out, and the bees have arrived on the sandfoin. We are now kneeling down in the crop, and this particular pyramidal orchid is about 1 foot tall, about 300 millimeters tall. The leaves are hugging the stem. You can almost not see them. They're long, lance-shaped leaves right down at the base there, and a lot of the basal leaves on all the orchids all over the farm have got this brown tinge to the tip of the leaf, and some of them have died away completely because of all the dry weather we had. But orchids kind of throw off the dry weather because all the energy and the moisture is stored for quite a time ahead of the flowering period in the tubers. Many orchids, because that's the Latin name, orchis, is a double ovoid tuber, and not all the pyramidal orchids have a double ovoid tuber. Some of them have a single one, but the flower spike is what gives the orchid its name. It is shaped exactly like a pyramid, and the flowers are just coming out. It's got a very long spur, 3 little petals at the base of them, deep purple in colour, and just stunningly beautiful. And the parts of the flower which haven't yet opened, the little flower buds in other words, form the top of the pyramid, and there'll perhaps be around 100 blooms on that.
It's the shape of a very colourful I don't know, pine cone, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's about that size as well. So this is a really decent flower, and it will produce a lot of seed. And when I say a lot of seed, that's exactly what I mean. The seed is as light as dust. So if I walked back into the field, it's absolutely peppered with pyramidal orchids now this year. We've got hundreds around us, but they're not common anymore because this habitat, this sort of chalk, clay with chalk in it, very high pH, is quite scarce, and the chalk layer comes in off the coast of Yorkshire, sort of snakes down through parts of Norfolk and quite close to Norwich. There's some old chalk mines, various places around the city of Norwich. It used to be dug to make mortar for all the early houses. It was mixed with sand, and the Romans also mined chalk as well as really early cement for mortar to hold the flints together for their buildings. So it's had a long use, and the chalk was then also added to agricultural land to correct acidity as well, so you could grow your sort of alkaline loving crops. But to have this growing on the farm, because this was heavily farmed 20 years ago, it's just a kind of feather in my hat. I cannot believe we've done 4 podcasts showing you different orchid species, none of which are hugely common.
This is a vast field. You must feel really
Yes.
happy that this has now become such a sight. I mean, it really is a visual feast, isn't it?
Yep, exactly that. And not only that, not just for us, just look around us. Nearly every sandfoin plant have bees on it, and a few minutes ago it was raining just as we arrived, and the whole thing is a kind of living part of the heritage, which is the bit that gets me excited. These are all young worker bees of various, that's a red-tailed bumblebee, there's buff tails as well, all about half the size of the queens, which will emerge later in the year. But the orchid is really a species, or this particular one, the pyramidal orchid, that likes the high pH soil. And I was explaining about that chalk layer coming down. It snakes through Norwich, comes under High Ash Farm. In fact, there's a chalk quarry which we can actually see only half a mile from us. That's Needham Chalks. And then the chalk layer carries on southwards. It sort of snakes a little bit under the north and south downs of London. So Box Hill's got chalk on it in Surrey. And then it finishes at the White Cliffs of Dover. Gives you an idea. But this is the sort of national plant of the Isle of Wight, if you like. It's a really special because the chalk carries on. And the Isle of Wight is a really important habitat for this particular species. So we're getting near the northern edge of many of the orchid species, but with warming climate, there's a chance that orchids will spread further north into the UK, even into Scotland. And look at this, Matthew.
Even nearer this time.
Right over our heads.
I don't think he likes us being here, actually.
I don't blame him, yes. But it is superb. It's just scything away. It's coming down right behind you and still singing. 20 yards away, going to drop down right behind you. Even closer, 10 yards. Just superb. So that's I couldn't make this up really, because it's right by the footpath, and it's really unbelievable. So anybody who's interested in photography, it's right in the centre of High Ash Farm, right on a high spot.
So the deep purples of the orchids,
Yes.
but the predominant yellow and white of the daisies, and all the other colours here, the pinks and the deep greens as well. This is all feast for the eye,
Yes.
wonderful for the pollinators, but
Yes.
also home for all of these skylarks.
The birds as well, it's superb. They love skylarks, one of the few birds that actually sing on the wing. It's got a cousin as well, which you might find around woodland, that's really scarce now. That's the woodlark, and we did have them at the farm here a few years back. Flies in a kind of figure of 8 around hedgerows and trees. Really scarce member of the lark family. You get shore larks as well, and out in this open territory they do sing on song posts, but because the habitat is completely open here with no perches for them to sit on. They generally sing on the wing and above there where their partner's nesting. And you'll come here perhaps at first light in the morning, 3:15 in the morning at the moment, and one skylark goes up. And once that happens, a whole sort of raft of sound, the whole lot just all come up together and sing together, and it is a soundscape is the only way to describe it. It's just wonderful. But so that's what you mean about biodiversity, a balanced habitat, and what happens as a result of it once you get the foundations right with all the plants, the old native plants. Look, there's yellow rattlebite barfy. This one's going to come into flower in about a month's time. Very delicate foliage. That's lady's bedstraw, formerly called Our Lady's bedstraw. And this diminutive little yellow flower down in the base, that's called black medic because of the colour of the shiny black seeds it produces. So, and with sort of knee-high in oxide daisies, the sandfoin's out above the top of it because it's a drought-resistant plant, and the bumblebees, even though it's now breezy, the whole air above us is just filled with bees as well, and that's what attracts the insectivorous birds. The swallows and the swifts will all come and feast on it, apart from feasting our eyes. Here comes the sun again. Just let's stand up and look over behind us. Just look at that. That is glorious.
It'll take me 10 minutes to walk to the other side, I think. It's just that big, isn't it? It's
yes.
vast.
Oh, yes, at least. This is 100 acres. It's 40 hectares. So it's a huge chunk of land, and it's farmland, I suppose, but to me it's now a nature reserve, if you like, and open to the public and free as well. Look at that. You can walk through this footpath. It's mown, it's 20 feet wide, comes right down the side of it, and you've got Boudica Way the other side, so you can do pyramidal orchids here and bee orchids on the other side. A couple of signs up explaining it all. Brilliant.
Mid-June now, and some nice warm sunshine, some blue sky, but also clouds scudding across the sky, and these Scots pines look like they've seen a bit of wind damage over the years, don't they? They're all on the her, as we say in Norfolk.
That's right. Some of them are nearly 45 degrees. There's one behind us which is leaning right over, and I don't know how they escape the sort of being blown out by the roots, because they're quite shallow rooted species.
And we're right up on a hill here.
We are on top of a hill, and I brought us here for a reason, because last week's podcast I promised that we would visit some of the flowering shrubs and trees that are on the farm, as well as all the wildflowers, and I mentioned elder, and we're kind of in an elder wood, if you like. It's elder's neither a tree nor a shrub. It kind of is halfway between, really, but nevertheless it comes into flower at this time of the year, and it's got a lot of history, and where we're standing is part of its history which has given us its name. We're standing bang on top of an Anglo-Saxon cemetery here at Hiresham. It's a scheduled monument, and it is about 2 acres, about a hectare almost, of burials underneath as the Anglo-Saxons cremated their dead, and they named elder, the Anglo-Saxon name for elder is eldrum, which means fire. And what we think is elder was used because it's rather unusual. If we walk up to one here, the trunk is about 4 inches in diameter, even larger down near the ground. It's a good 6 inches through the trunk, and it's if I was to bring a saw here and cut it off, it's hollow in the middle, and it was thought that you could blow down the tube into the base of a fire and get it really, really hot, perhaps to smelt some metal, or for pottery in a kiln. So it had various uses, and I used to use elder. You'd use the younger growth, and make pea shooters out of it with your friends. It had this hollow in, and you could have a little plunger and push down, and it would fire little seeds or something like that at your friends. So it was great fun. So a lot of history attached to it, and also it doesn't seem particularly resilient to fungi. So there is one of the fungus which you see most of the year. It's just been renamed from Jew's ear to jelly ear, and it does look exactly like a human ear, and it seems very sort of susceptible to that particular fungus. But it has a lot of culinary uses as well. The leaves actually don't smell very nice whatsoever. They're a little leaf on a stalk with 4, 5 or 6 leaflets on. They're called pinnate leaves, rather like ash leaves where you get little groups of them. And I'll just pull one of the leaves off like that off the stalk, and then crush it up a bit in my hand, roll it up and crush it. And if I give you that to smell, it's not
A bit musty.
good. That's a really good description of it. It's meant to smell like a sort of disused mouse nest. So mustiness is a really adept description of it. And the flowers are rather different. They have a honey scent. We'll try and get one here, right beside us. And
these are big clusters of cream-coloured flowers.
Yes, they're beautiful, aren't they? It's
only very small.
Sort of colour that a bride's dress would be. It's sort of creamy white colour, and the sun's just come out on it and illuminated it. And it's about 4 inches across. It's a flat flower, and the flowers that have just finished over are already beginning. There's one there. Just beginning to produce elderberries, but they're tiny at the moment. They're not much larger than a pin's head. They've been pollinated, and they will ripen over the summer months. Now, because of the sort of honey smell, it's not particularly attractive to bees. So when I'm watching the pollination happening here, more often than not it's flies that get attracted to it, and hoverflies in particular, but sort of normal house flies like blue bottles and green bottles, they'll come and pollinate the flowers because it doesn't seem hugely attractive to the common honeybee, for instance, and
Quite
bumblebees.
attractive to some of us people, though, isn't it? Because these flower heads are made into cordial.
Yes, they certainly are. You pick them, and several people that I know make elderflower cordial. You can make elderflower wine. My mum used to make elderflower chutney from it as well, and from the berries. So as those little berries ripen, they turn from green to sort of scarlet red and go very limp, and they kind of hang down in little clusters vertically down on sort of wine red stems as well, and that's the time to pick them when they're really ripe like that, and you can make elderflower wine, which is really, really very acceptable, I'll put it, and I have made some in previous years. So really lovely plant, lots of history attached to it, and it was often planted on graveyards. So when you see elder in large groups like this, and we've probably got over 100 shrubs growing all the way around us on this.
We are surrounded in the shadows of these giant
Scots pines.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's sort of, because it's a scheduled monument, we don't do any agricultural practices on it at all, but the horses can come in and graze, and there's a whole bed of stinging nettles underneath, which is another plant which likes lots of nitrogen in the soil. And remember, if this was a cemetery, there were some inhumations here as well, in other words, some burials as well as cremations in the cremation urns. And you can see some of the urns that were dug from this site in Norwich Castle Museum. They're on display, and it's a site of international importance because the potters over in Saxony in Germany, some of them came over, and it's almost like an autograph. The urns that they made in Germany are an exact copy of the ones they made here at Caister. They dug clay out from a pit not far from where we are. The clay was fired, perhaps using the elder to assist the fires to make the pottery, and then the deceased people were cremated and their remains were put in the urns, together with, say you worked with leather, you'd have some leather and a bodkin put in the urn with you, so you could carry on your trade in the afterlife. And we're on top of a hill, so it was thought the spirits from the urns and the necks of the urns were buried level with the top of the soil, so the spirits could come out and you'd go into the heavens and you could carry on your trade with your tools close at hand in the afterlife. So a lot of history, and the nettles, the horses will come in here in about September time, once the sort of stingy part has all died down, and the horses eat the nettles right down to the ground because they're full of iron and natural vitamins. And it's the same with the elder. In fact, elder used to be planted on cemeteries, particularly when there'd been executions, because it was thought the elder would soak up the badness from the people that had been executed and come out into a new life through the elder and go off into the spirit world and have a second chance at a new life. So that's one way of thinking about it.
We've got some heavy stuff on the podcast this week, haven't
You're
we?
telling me? Well, yes, it's all death and life, and it always is on a farm. Things are born here nearly every day. Things have their life here, as I've had, and at the other end of it, there's Caister Church, where perhaps I'll finish my day. It's not morbid, it's that cycle of life, and it's a complete wheel, and it's really, when you understand it, it makes you more aware of the immediacy and how short life is. Actually, it goes through very quickly, slip through your fingers, and the years flash past like nobody's business. But we've come to the second high spot today on the farm. This is Caister Park. We've got the Roman town, and the Romans were here just previous to the occupants of this cemetery. So the Saxons came on a few hundred years later when the Roman occupation had ceased, and so it's a really historic spot, and the first high spot for quite a distance around, really. So that's why it was used for a cemetery, which is where we're standing on. So yeah, as I said, there's lots of history, but it's not depressing. It's learning about the past to help us manage the future as sustainably as possible.
And these wonderful elders.
Yes. There we are. So maybe I'll be tempted to gather some of the flower and make us some elderflower wine to enjoy later in the year, or even elderberry wine, where you get that deep claret coloured on the wine itself once the berries are ripe. And not only is it good for the flies to pollinate it, but in the autumn, hordes of the winter visiting thrushes, things like redwing, fieldfare, together with our own blackbirds, come and feast on the berries, and groups of starlings as well. I've seen all these trees just black with a huge murmuration of starlings just coming in and stripping all the berries off almost in a day or two. So if you want to gather them, you've got to be pretty quick.
Got lots of emails to talk about this week, and we're just at the bottom of the hill from where we just were. I can see the cemetery just on the top of the hill. Got a different perspective from this angle, don't you?
Yes, you can see how much those venerable old Scots pines are leaning, and how they withstand the wind. I said it's just a permanent mystery to us. We're on Caister Park now, a large area of horse grazing, short pasture, and surrounded by mature trees as well. We're standing underneath a venerable old sweet chestnut tree, which in about 2 weeks' time will be in full flower, one of the last trees out in the British countryside to come into flower. Although it's an introduced species, then it does something amazing. The little sort of fruits of the sweet chestnut start to ripen and produce nuts in late September. How it does it so quickly is just a mystery to me. And in the background I can still hear the last rooks about to leave the nest, if they haven't done so already.
The rookeries at the end here, isn't it?
Yes, they're called branches and once they've left the nest, they can't fly properly for a few days, and they clamber about, and you have this rather raucous cawing, you call it, I suppose. It's not been the most attractive sound, and they'll be joining the large flock, which is giving me a red face this morning. The overwinter wild bird seed mix is just emerging from the ground. Yesterday the fields were brown. This morning there's a definite green hue to them, and that must be the 10:30 Norwich to London train, or just after, shooting down to Liverpool Street in London, going through what we call Dunstan Cut, where the railway line cuts through one of the hills on the west side of High Ash Farm. Wonderful.
I think we're happy here, aren't we?
Oh, we're just out of the worst of the wind. It's still quite breezy. Yes, yeah, no, I'd head the opposite way if I had a chance of going to London. Yes.
And Rat's just having a nice time exploring. He's very chilled today.
He is rather, isn't he? Just sauntering down the lovely wide track here, which is one of the permissive walks on the farm.
He hasn't found any snakes yet.
No, he's using his nose as he goes along. He's in the world of scents and smells. That's his thing.
Well, thank you for all the messages this week. Lindsay Walker has emailed a couple of times, in fact. Hedgehogs. We're usually told that a hedgehog seen out during daylight hours is not a good thing. But the one in my garden, says Lindsay, comes out every day, lunchtime onwards, as one did the same thing last year and went on to produce 3 hoglets. I'm now hoping this is either the same female or perhaps another expectant mother out foraging. I go out and feed it dried hedgehog food whenever I see it, and now the blackbirds have cottoned onto this and have learned very quickly that if they follow the hedgehog around, they can then cash in on a convenient and tasty meal. But they're a delight to watch, she says.
Oh, fantastic. Well done for looking after it. It's one of those species that has declined hugely out in the countryside, and you're doing a sterling job. But the hedgehogs will often pull out an earthworm, which forms a major part of their diet, and only eat half of it, and the remnants are ideal food for the blackbirds, so they've learnt to kind of follow the hedgehogs.
Well, Lindsay sent us another message the day after saying, good news, I spotted 2 baby hoglets under the garden hedge today. That's terrific, isn't it?
That is really, really well done. So what's happened at this time of the year, it's not abnormal, I should say, to see young hedgehogs or even adult hedgehogs about at this time of the year. Just bearing in mind they're mainly nocturnal when most of their food is out, slugs, snails and obviously earthworms near the surface of the soil. But we're coming up to the shortest night, in other words the longest day, and that means when the female, the sows, that's the female hedgehog, have to find lots of food, they will spill over into daylight hours to forage, because they're not only feeding themselves, but they've got to produce milk to feed the hoglets as well. So they can be about in daylight hours, and the same, funny enough, happens to the owls here at High Ash Farm. Our barn owls are certainly about hunting until 9 in the morning, so it's been daylight for 3, 4, 5 hours, and again they're out again early evening, about 7 p.m. onwards on the grass strips which surround many of the fields, looking for the early mammals to come out. Remember, owls and hedgehogs will sort of follow what their prey does, and because of the nature of slugs and snails in particular, they cannot really be out in hot sunshine. They dehydrate so quickly, so they themselves are fairly nocturnal, and the hedgehogs follow suit. So that's how it all works.
Swallows flying into one of the large barns at High Ash Farm, feeding their young. This is one of the big conservation success stories I know you're very proud of.
Just brings a huge delight. 4 youngsters just waiting for mum and dad.
The podcast aims to bring you sights and sounds like this every week, and we're very thankful of your support. So any donations or subscriptions are very welcome indeed.
All we need is a little bit of extra help. It just keeps it going from week to week.
Monthly or one-off subscriptions, whatever the size. And the website, highashfarm.com/podcast.
6 youngsters right above our head, all with their gates wide open.
Here's one from Sean McGarry, who lives not far from here, near the coast, near Great Yarmouth, about 20 miles away. And for anyone who hasn't been to Norfolk in recent times or never been here at all, one of the really hot topics at the moment is power generation and the fact that this area is going to be crucial for the country's green energy in the future. But the flip side of this is vast tracts of, well, previously very productive farmland will become areas of solar panels. And Sean asked for your opinion on this, but more importantly, he's sent an article saying that it's possible to have panels and still have crops underneath and biodiversity, and he wants you to say what you think about this.
Yes, well, I'm in favour of sort of home generated electricity, bearing in mind when my parents came to the farm, there's a engineering company in the centre of Norwich called Panks. It's still there, and they erected a wind turbine right in the centre of High Ash Farm. It was 110 volts of electricity it generated, so it was a different power system, and it powered the grinders in the barns, and in the evening when the agricultural requirement wasn't needed, the farmhouse was powered by the windmill, all back then. So it was kind of using green energy, and I think the windmill blew down in 1953. We had a big sort of the big floods and the storm surge that happened took the windmill over, and Archie King's, the local scrap merchant, cut it all. It was pretty tall and very effective. So I'm very much in favour of home generated electricity, and I took my children just to East Somerton, quite close to Winterton on the coast, and that was one of the first places where there was a series of wind turbines there. They're only about 25 metres tall, but it was quite something to see them whirring around and to hear them. And now the new fashion is solar panels, as well as, I think today, permission's been given for the go-ahead of Sizewell C on the Suffolk coast, only about 40 miles from where we're sitting, and that's a nuclear power, so that's continuous power generation. And the problem with solar panels and wind, you really only get the electricity when either the wind's blowing or you get some degree of sunshine, particularly at this time of the year. But they are very obtrusive in the countryside, and when you're taking up land that's used for home food production, remember we're an island, we've got very high population, and much of the food that we consume is imported, so that to get that balance right of taking land out of production, so I'm in favour of having them hugely on top of houses. Then you're not taking up the land, and the generation can be used either in the property or go back into the national grid. But when you have these huge solar farms, particularly where our emailers come from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, it can be very, very dry weather over in California.
That's where the article was from, wasn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
yes. And so underneath the panels, you can actually have a crop growing and have grazing animals. It's very difficult to harvest the green material from under them for use, but grazing animals, things like sheep, can certainly graze it because it's protected from the worst of the summer droughts that happen over there, and it's learning to use new ways of generating electricity with the environment. If the two can go hand in hand, then I'm much more in favour of it. But I'm very dubious indeed, because Norfolk is the kind of grain basket, East Anglia is, of the country and the countryside. And to see large areas of it, it's hugely important that we produce home-produced food. Remember, the first place we visited on top of that hill, which is called the Gunfield, we were under attack from a neighbouring country, and to have food coming in from abroad wasn't possible because submarines were sinking our food importing vessels that were coming in from New Zealand and other places. And so to go back, they say history repeats itself, and I think we should be extremely cautious about taking land out of production that's really difficult to get back into production. It was probably forest centuries ago, and so you do have these huge cycles of change. So although I'm not a Luddite, I love change, and farmers aren't particularly good at change. They're very stubborn in their ways and set in their ways, but I'm all for power generation, but in the right place as well, on house roofs, and all new buildings should have compulsory solar panels on it, without a doubt.
Here's a note from Odette. She loves the wonderful podcast, she says. I listened to several times.
Poor lady.
Advice, though, is what she's after. Our lawn is full of daisies. I love them. I want to add more wildflowers that are low growing to form a mini meadow of low growing plants. I've got a list of flower seeds to add, such as bird's foot trefoil and self-heal. But how often should I cut it, and when, please?
Yes, so you can add a few more varieties to that, because some plants you can actually sow onto grassland as long as it's short at the end of the flowering season, and you can just add the seed to the grass and rake it in. And you've already mentioned bird's foot trefoil, which is absolutely perfect. Self-heal is your other mention. Both brilliant plants for bees in the daytime and for moths as well, and butterflies too. There's a few more for you. Yarrow, Achilles milfolium, is brilliant. Black medic, tiny little yellow flowers. One of my favourites as well, which has a lovely honey perfume and fantastic for moths and hoverflies and some butterflies, is lady's bedstraw. They're all good, but always remember, at the end of the flowering season, when your last flowers have finished flowering, not only that, but set their seed, that's the time to cut it. You can be quite nasty if you can use a strimmer and get the seed out onto the ground, so you have self-seeding going on, and then remove all the sort of aftermath from the previous crop. And the reason that you're doing that is, A, you're not forming a mulch over the top to stop new seedlings developing, but also it helps to reduce the fertility. And at High Ash, I've been doing it for well over 20 years now, cutting and removing, and that's why the more interesting plants have come along, things like the orchids we visited earlier today, and the lower the fertility, so certainly don't put fertiliser on if you're dealing with old farmers' meadows and starting off a new wildflower field. It's really difficult because farmers will often use nitrogen, which doesn't stay in the soil for long but promotes very active growth, potash and phosphates as well, and those two remain in the soil and continue to fertilise the grasses, which can out-compete your wildflowers. So it sounds a little bit complicated. Once you get the hang of it, cut and remove after flowering and seed setting, then you're on a winner.
Well, we're on a winner every week with this, Chris. Thank you once again for inviting us onto the farm. Another Countryside podcast almost at a close. But if you would like to send an email and ask Chris a question or a comment, anything arising from the podcast, the address, chris@highashfarm.com. And it's going to be virtually the longest day when we're next here, isn't it?
Yes, June the 21st. It's creeping up and the days start to get shorter, but just a little bit. So enjoy summer and all the glorious things that you can find out in the countryside, or if you have time to walk as well. It's a really special time of year, a time of renewal.